Handling the discussion about city and state partnerships for river cities. And with us today are Drew Buntin, who is with the Missouri Department of Natural Resources, as well as immediate past chair of the Upper Mississippi River Basin Association. And also with us today is Michael Marshall, federal co-chairman of the Delta Regional Authority, and more importantly, a former mayor, folks. We got a mayor from, was it Sikeston? Sikeston, Missouri. So he ought to know what the hell he's talking about anyway. And, of course, about a third of our members, or a third of our mayors are members of the Delta Authority service area, and more than half, as I understand it, are in states covered by the Upper Mississippi River Basin Association. So, gentlemen, we're glad, appreciate you taking time to be with us this afternoon and to talk about state partnerships and the importance to our work as a new organization to promote and protect the river. So we're very interested in how you feel your organizations can associate with ours and how we can both make things better for everyone. So with that, I'd like to give you Mr. Buntin.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have not been a mayor, so perhaps I don't know what the hell I'm talking about, but I'm going to do my best to struggle through nonetheless. Colin had asked me, just as you kind of touched on, I think probably the Upper Mississippi River Basin Association is the organization that probably most closely resembles this group and kind of what I understand kind of the impetus for you all coming together and kind of the diversity of some of the issues that you're likely going to be considering as your focus areas. And so I was asked to come and talk about, you know, how we can work together, how we can be resources for each other in trying to tackle some of these issues. And you know, I don't want to be presumptuous by saying how we're going to work together. You know, I think that's going to be determined on by the issues that you decide that are the priority issues for you. So I thought I would start by just kind of sharing how the Upper Mississippi River Basin Association is made up, you know, what states do we include, kind of how we're organized, and the issues that we focus on. But I would highlight that because we are made up of the 5 Upper Basin states, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Illinois, Iowa, and Missouri, you know, the issues that we focus on change based upon the conditions and challenges out there on the river. One that remains fairly consistent is obviously the infrastructure issue because of the importance to the economies of all of our states. The Upper Mississippi River Basin Association, as I said, is made up of the 5 states in the Upper Basin because of some of the differences that you've heard about earlier in terms of the pooled reaches of the river versus the open river. These states came together in 1981. It was actually the governors of the 5 states that got together and by executive order established the Upper Mississippi River Basin Association as kind of a follow-up on what had existed prior to that, which was the Upper Mississippi River Basin Commission. That had been created by Congress in the 60s, and there was some consternation from the states in terms of perhaps there being a little too much of a federal agency focus in those efforts. And so when that commission was eliminated by President Reagan's executive order in 1981, the 5 Upper Basin governors, and that was kind of in the midst of these navigation infrastructure challenges coming to the forefront, the Upper Basin governors formed this organization. And so we've been in existence for 31 years now. The mission statement of the organization, while a lot of the focus historically has been on the navigation infrastructure issues, it's broader than that, and it's really become much more diverse than just the navigation issues, especially, I would say, in the last 10 years. But the mission is to facilitate a dialogue and cooperative action regarding water and related land resource issues in the basin. More specifically, we want to be a regional interstate forum for discussion, study, and evaluation of some of these river-related issues of common interest to the states. We want to create a venue for us to talk to our federal partners, and I'll talk a little bit about who those federal partners are, but then also to our non-federal partners, to some of the non-governmental organizations that are interested in river issues. So the states determine who their representatives are on the board of directors of the association. It's really a fairly diverse group. In Iowa, Iowa's represented actually by 4 different agencies: the Iowa Department of Agriculture, Department of Natural Resources, Department of Economic Development, and Transportation. They're kind of the anomaly in that they've got multiple representation on the board. I represent the state of Missouri, and I am Deputy Director of the Department of Natural Resources, which is more the environmental and soil and water conservation and state parks agency in the state of Missouri. In the state of Illinois, it's the Water Division of the Illinois Department of Natural Resources. In Minnesota, it's the Commissioner of Agriculture is the Minnesota rep. And in Wisconsin, it's the Regional Director of their Department of Natural Resources, the region that includes the Mississippi River. The kind of the role of the board members is, although we're from these specific agencies, it's our responsibility to facilitate communication on any issues of interest to the other states. So, although transportation issues by some measure come out of the realm of responsibility for my agency, I'm expected to coordinate and present the state's position on those issues. The same would be true on some of the floodplain management issues that I know you all have touched on a little bit thus far. The federal advisory members of our board are the Department of Agriculture, USDA, Natural Resource Conservation Service that Chief White leads and spoke to you about at lunch, the Army Corps of Engineers, Mississippi Valley Division, the Environmental Protection Agency, both Region 5 and Region 7 that make up, that have responsibility for the basin. Homeland Security, including FEMA and the Coast Guard, Department of Interior, so Fish and Wildlife Service, and the U.S. Geological Survey, and U.S. Department of Transportation, the Maritime Administration. These federal advisors don't have voting rights, but they do sit at the table, and we have discussions with them, and they have an opportunity to raise issues that their agencies are facing, and we have an opportunity to have a conduit, a designated conduit to work through issues that the states have. The primary issues that really are before the organization right now are some of the issues that I'll just briefly touch on that you've already heard about. Obviously, the navigation infrastructure challenges are huge, and this has been something that we've struggled with for a number of years. It wasn't too long ago in the late 90s when there was a whole lot of controversy about some of the planning efforts for the navigation improvements. There were allegations of some whistleblower allegations about some of the economics that were being worked on to justify enhancing and rehabbing some of these navigation structures. There was really not a whole lot of middle ground. A lot of the folks that were more interested in the ecological issues were concerned about the historic impacts to some of the natural resources by the placement of the locks and dams in the first place. They certainly were not interested in any enhancement of those structures, and in some regards that's still the case. But we tried to have some discussions over some of these hard issues of, is there a compromise? Is there any room for compromise on some of these issues? And, there's still some folks that feel like there really is not, that these improvements are not justified. But there are some of the navigation interests and environmental groups, such as Nature Conservancy, the Audubon, Paul Rohde that spoke to you before. There's really kind of a coalition of folks that got together and decided, okay, we understand that the navigation industry is concerned with drawing down some of the pools, which the environmentalists were more interested in, and some of the resource agencies to increase some of the aquatic vegetation that was lost by creating these pools in the first place. We understand that some of the environmental groups feel like the navigation practices are harmful to the environment, but can't we come up with some kind of middle ground here? And the middle ground that at least in some effort was put forward as a compromise was, for every dollar that you're going to spend on navigation enhancements, we're going to put a comparable dollar in to do environmental restoration projects that are consistent with navigation. Now, that was authorized, but has not been funded by Congress. But I think just the authorization of it and the fact that folks attempted to get together on a controversial issue and come up with perhaps a different way to tackle that is something that I think the Basin Association helped to facilitate. I also work on the Missouri River, and there's not a comparable organization really on the Missouri River, and it's also complicated by the fact that there are storage issues there that really lead to some interstate water wars, basically, where there's just no room for compromise and really no forum to have some of these discussions. So oftentimes when you really get worn down and you don't know quite how you're going to continue to deal with these issues, you start to, an old Lily Tomlin quote often comes to my mind, when things get tough, just remember, we're all in this alone. And that's sometimes how it feels on the Missouri River. I can honestly say that because there is a forum for the states to sit down and talk through some of these things, and even if Wisconsin has an issue, it may not be particularly relevant to me, but if it doesn't harm us and we can all get together and collectively support the state's interest. And so I would just share that's kind of what's developed through the Basin Association. Some of the issues in addition to navigation, the ecosystem restoration that I discussed, flood risk management is a focus that we often have. Aquatic nuisance species or invasive species, silver carp, zebra mussels, other things like that. Hydropower, there have been several communities along the river and other interests that have been interested in putting in some low-head hydro dams. So we've established a hydropower group that was working with them on some of those issues, and also there's a company, Free Flow Power, that has been interested and actually received from some preliminary permits from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission to put some structures out in the channel itself. There's some concern about the impacts to fisheries and the navigation channel itself and other issues, but we established a hydropower ad hoc work group to look at some of those issues. And then water quality has been kind of a more recent issue. We heard about some of the nutrient issues earlier in this meeting. Obviously, it's a huge challenge for a lot of the states. And we found that really the states had a lot of these efforts going on, but we weren't talking to each other. And so you had states that weren't even monitoring the same common reaches of the river and really weren't having discussions about, okay, these are huge management challenges that involve both municipalities, agriculture sector, we need to have a common forum to discuss these issues. And so we created a water quality task force that's made up of more of the technical experts, and then a water quality executive committee that's made up of the officials that lead kind of the water pollution agencies in the 5 states. And so that's been more of a more recent, relative to the age of the organization, a more recent focus. So those are some of the issues, and you know, I'm encouraged by this meeting and the fact that some of the communities along the river are really starting to get together to talk about how can you lend a voice collectively to some of the issues that are important to you. And I would say that we have an open door. I know that I can speak for the other states in saying we want to hear how we can work together. How can we help you maybe amplify some of the messages that you want to deliver? How can we help each other in that regard? How can you help us on some of the issues that we're working on? I think that we're completely open to how our 2 organizations could work together, and I would certainly look forward to hearing what you would be interested in us advocating on your behalf. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Buntin. Mr. Marshall.
Yes. Let me pass out my PowerPoint here. My name is Mike Marshall. I'm the co-chairman of the Delta Regional Authority. The chairman is a fellow named Chris Massingale. He couldn't be here today, so they sent me. I'm the number 2 man at the DRA, or as I say, I'm the Joe Biden of the DRA. And I can assure you that the folks down at DRA are just scared to death what I'm going to say today. So, let me tell you a little bit about the Delta Regional Authority, and this is what the map I'm passing around to you. It's a federal-state partnership. Our primary goal is infrastructure projects. 75% of our funds go towards infrastructure and transportation projects. The balance goes towards workforce development, and entrepreneurism and business development. We're made up of 252 counties and parishes, and we start about St. Genevieve, Missouri, which is just a county south of here, and we go all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico on both sides of the Mississippi River. 8 states make up the Delta region. It's Missouri, Illinois, Kentucky, Tennessee, Arkansas, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Alabama. It was created in 2000, and the primary purpose was these counties along the Mississippi River, the Delta region, happen to be some of the poorest counties in the country. A lot of that has to do with how agriculture has changed over the years, and it's more mechanical, less labor intensive, and so lots of things have challenged the Delta region. We're challenged with the health issues and things like that. So that was the purpose of forming the Delta Regional Authority, trying to create some jobs and create some infrastructure to promote the Delta region. And as you mentioned, I was former mayor of the city of Sikeston, Missouri. I don't know if you all are familiar with Sikeston, but if you drive down the interstate here in St. Louis going south, you go through all the hills, and about south of Cape Girardeau, about 15 miles, all of a sudden you'll go over a hill and then you'll hit the flat land, and if you come at nighttime, you can see the lights all the way coming from New Orleans. I mean, it's as flat as it can be. That's the geographical beginning of the Delta. The Delta region itself, of course, encompasses more counties, but the flatlands begins about where my hometown is. I was mayor of Sikeston, and I was also a banker at the time. I only got paid $1 a year as mayor, and a lot of the citizens thought I was overpaid at that, but. But anyway, I remember something that Mayor Vince Shamel, who was the mayor of St. Louis, told me one time about being a mayor. He said, you know, your friends may come and go, but your enemies just accumulate. And I think you mayors could probably agree with that. I might mention one other thing about where I come from. The first town, once you hit that flatland, is a town called Blodgett. That's where my father and his father lived. He told me the story back in the 1920s, that the Blodgett is a small town, about 250 people. It was about the same size back then. And my grandfather happened to be the mayor of Blodgett. And, you know, every town that size had, I'm sure y'all don't have them, but had the town drunk. Well, the town drunk was my grandfather, but the town drunk was a fellow named Johnny Peel. And they'd gather down at the grocery store, the local store, every day and tell stories. Well, Johnny came in one day and he said, you know, I've never been out of the county. I've never been out of Scott County. I sure would like to go to St. Louis, which is 150 miles north. Well, my grandfather, he was also a banker. He said, well, I'll tell you what I'm going to do, Johnny Peel. I'm going to buy you a round-trip ticket to St. Louis so you can go up there and see what it's like up there in the big city. So the next day, he got in the round-trip ticket, and Johnny got on the train there in Blodgett. And, of course, Johnny had a little corn whiskey with him. It was during Prohibition, but he found somewhere out there on the farms. Of course, Johnny got a snoot full of whiskey on his way up to St. Louis, and he fell asleep. Well, they pulled into Union Station, and he woke up a little while after that. And if you all been to Union Station here in St. Louis, I don't know if you have it. It's still a lot the same today. But anyway, he got out of the train and he walked around Union Station, was just looking at everything, and for about 3 hours spent the time there at Union Station. Got back on the train and went back home. And the next day, down at the grocery store, they said, "Well, Johnny Peel, what did you think about St. Louis?" He said, "Man, that's one heck of a town. They even built a roof over it." So you can tell Mayor Slay that. Let me talk about a couple of things. I mentioned that our purpose, of course, is infrastructure and create jobs. And you know, the cities along the river, Mississippi River, that have ports are sitting in a very, very good position right now, in my opinion. The river defines the delta, okay? It was mentioned earlier about the Panama Canal expansion. It's going on right now. It should be completed in 2014, I believe. That's going to change a lot of things for our country. The way it is now, the way I see it, is these big ships from Asia, which is where most of our products are manufactured and come over, they're sitting out in the Pacific Ocean outside of Long Beach, California, and some other ports along the West Coast, waiting there so they can have their turn to come into their ports, those big ocean ports, and unload these container boxes that you see up and down the river, up and down the highway and the rail. Well, with the expansion of the Panama Canal, these big ships, instead of going to California, now they still some will, but instead of going there, they can come through that Panama Canal, come up to New Orleans or Mobile, Alabama. The way I envision it, unloads these these containers onto barges and come up the river, up to our ports along the river. I see it being a former mayor. One of the things, you know, we don't manufacture a lot in the United States anymore. What we do manufacture, we do a darn good job at, but we just don't do that much. But we consume a lot. We buy a lot of products from Asia. Well, my town in Sykeston, which is close to the river, we have become a distribution center. We're having distribution for hardware stores and things like that. I envision these ships coming up, these barges coming up the Mississippi River to our individual ports, unloading these containers, having distribution centers up and down the Mississippi River, up and down the valley there. You're in the center part of the country, and it would make so much sense to develop our towns along that line of thinking. So that's something that I think that you all need to be kind of considering doing and kind of promoting. But I can promise you this, if we don't address that, and if we don't plan for that, and if we don't push for that, what's going to happen is those ships are going to come through the Panama Canal, they're going to go around Florida and come up the East Coast, and we're going to be in the same condition. They're just going to be railing from the east instead of from the west. So that's something that I think that y'all could work on together, and I guarantee I think it would add a lot to our communities, and it could be a real game changer. I think it could be for the Delta, but I think it could be for the whole Mississippi system. You know, ports are important. I liken it to having a highway that doesn't have an off-ramp on it. If you don't have a port, then the Mississippi River is just something that just travels by you and floods now and then. But if you've got a port, you've got opportunity to develop and grow, and that's what we want. I think one of the goals that I have with the Delta Regional Authority is our towns in the Delta region, my hometown, is losing population. The young folks are moving off. Both my kids, one lives in St. Louis and one lives in Nashville. I would like to build a community where they want to come home and live in the community. And not so much that I want to see my kids, but I'd like to see some grandkids someday. So I'm a little bit selfish. But, you know, so that's I think that's a reasonable goal, and I think that's a fair goal. One thing else I might mention, I talked about barges. You know, this report I saw over on the table, it kind of tells the whole story on barges. First of all, the river is the most economically and environmentally cleanest way to move product. If you shut the river down, shut the transportation down on the river, it would take, I think, 60 million trucks, 64 million trucks to replace that. We don't need more trucks on our highways. Matter of fact, there are plenty of them now. But to give you another example, a 15 barge tow, which is the typical tow from here going south, 15 barges is equal to 225 rail cars or 870 over-the-road trucks. That's some powerful numbers right there. That's some powerful numbers. So the river has got so much potential. I don't think we're even touching the potential that the river has as far as commerce and as far as opportunities that we can have throughout the Delta region, throughout the whole Mississippi Valley. And you know, I'm proud to be a part of it. I think that it's got such a grand future, and I think you all probably are proud to be a part of it too. And I think, you know, what you're doing by forming this mayor association is kind of like what the Delta Regional Authority did. You're concentrating on regionalism. You know, little small towns up and down the Delta region alone, they can't get very much done, but together we can get a lot of things done. The same thing's true with the mayors in this organization here. So I wish you a lot of luck, and I'd be happy to help in any way I can. Through the Delta Regional Authority, we'd be very supportive. We've done some projects down in Vidalia. Down in Osceola, we've done some projects. Vicksburg, Memphis, done a few things in Memphis. We've got a pretty good success, a pretty good track record right now. I might give you one more example, and I'll shut up. But you know, we are a government agency, but we're limber and lean, and I'm not limber and lean, but the agency is. We can do things, and we can do things fast. I got a call a couple of weeks ago from Hickman, Kentucky, a small river town, and they were having the Corps was dredging the channel in the river, and the Hickman port had been shut down since May because the silt had built up and the river was down. I got a call on a Friday morning from the port director, and he said, is there any emergency funds that the DRA can give to help us dredge out our harbor, since the dredge is here right now? He called Friday morning. We've got eight states, which means we have 8 governors that have to vote. Well, their designees vote, but eight different votes throughout the 8 states to approve a project, plus the Chairman Massengale. We were able to give him an answer that Friday afternoon and give him a check that Monday morning. Now that's your government in action, your government working good, and I'm proud to be a part of a government agency like that. But anyway, that's all I have, and I'll be happy to answer some questions here in a little bit.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. Mayors, any particular questions at this time? Yes.
Mr. Marshall,
Yes.
Has there been any studies done or any feasibilities of some of these ports you're talking about that when you were talking about coming around through the Panama Canal and coming up the river?
There's been some studies. My opinion, not enough studies have been done. I think that it's something that needs to be pushed. I think the Corps has done some preliminary work on it, and I think that would be probably the place to start. But we got to get moving. Got to get moving.
Are you familiar? There is a port right up here, just the other side of St. Louis.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that the kind you're envisioning?
Well,
I've never been there myself. I'll be honest.
yeah, I mean, what it's going to take, I think it's going. Of course, it's going to take money, but what it's going to take to get these, I think we need to concentrate on these containers. That's where the shipping is dealing with, And it's going to take these large cranes to pick the containers up and stack them and unload them and unload them. And that's what it's going to take, infrastructure like that. And that's the sort of thing that I think the ports are going to be needing to look at. You know, we do grants. We would hopefully be able to help in that respect some. But it's going to take some visioning like that. It's also going to take quite a bit of land. One of the things that I was with the port, SEMO port down south of Cape Girardeau, one of the best ports along the river. They just don't have very much land, usable land. It's going to take plenty of flat land, which a lot of your all's ports have, to be able to stack and store these containers. So those are the type of things it's going to take. Also, if you can combine a port with a railroad system, that makes a big difference. Multimodal, where you can ship it from the river, from the big ships to the barges, upriver, unload onto rail or to truck. That'll make a big difference. You know, like I said, now if it's coming from the West Coast, it's coming by rail. If they bypass us and go over to the East Coast, it's going to come back to us by rail. But if we come up the middle of the river, we're right in the middle of the country, we can go from rail and truck out both directions.
If I understand correctly, this improvement in the Panama Canal allows for the containers to be bigger, wider?
No, ma'am. The containers are pretty standard size,
Okay.
but they could carry more containers.
Okay, more of them, which still leaves us with the situation with the locks.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. You're still going to have that issue. You're always going to have that issue. That's a river issue. But I know this. I'm more familiar here south with the river, and there's a lot of barges going south carrying grain, but there's a lot of empty barges coming north not carrying anything, deadheading, as they say. Well, I could envision filling those barges up with some containers.
Any other mayors? Go
I'll
ahead.
make one more comment, just to give an example of what Mr. Marshall was talking about, just north of here, Grafton, which is probably 30 miles up the river, I'm not sure how far, but they are right on the edge of opening up a fish plant to ship. They've got to guarantee China 60 million pounds of Asian carp a year.
Yeah.
And they're on the verge in the next 4 to 5 months of getting that plant open and operating. So 60 million pounds of fish, a lot of fish, and that's just one product.
Yeah, I read about that.
Yeah.
Invasive species and dredging, two separate issues someone wanted me to bring up. How does your organization work on that? How can the mayors help on either of those, and where are you at on those two issues?
Well, one of the main focuses lately has been really with invasive species barriers to prevent migration into the Great Lakes. And so, you know, that's one of the issues where, you know, from Missouri's perspective on Asian carp, for example, the toothpaste is kind of out of the tube. I mean, they're already migrated well up the Missouri River and on the areas of the Mississippi that we deal with. But we have kind of lent our support through the Basin Association to the states of Illinois and the state of Minnesota in terms of being concerned with further migration impacting their resources in other areas. So one of the things that they've been looking at in St. Paul District is one of the lower utilized locks in that area, closing off that lock to prevent migration of Asian carp further up the river in Minnesota. The other is really working with several of the federal agencies on the strategy to prevent Asian carp migration into the Great Lakes. So that's one example on invasive species, and the other was the other question you had?
Well, it was the issue of dredging. Someone asked, how can you assist? How can we assist? And that's becoming a bigger problem.
Yeah.
Constant problem.
Dredging, really our focus on dredging has been in some of the areas that Mr. Marshall was talking about, New Madrid, Missouri, and some of the areas on the lower river. And so really, because there's not a comparable organization to the Upper Mississippi River Basin Association on the state level in terms of representing, you know, all of the lower basin states, we really are left to pursue those on our own, and so we worked with Memphis District of the Corps to try and help facilitate getting some contract dredgers into some of those ports that are especially important to those communities in the southeastern part of the state.
I might mention on the dredging issue as well, you know, used to the smaller ports, or in the Memphis port, the bigger ports too, got dredged by way of earmarks. And of course they quit doing earmarks. The Corps' budget's very tight, as we've been told. And just so happens this past year, a lot of the dredging that has happened in the agriculture ports, or the ports in the Delta region, have happened as a result of emergency flood management funds. This special funds that were intended to help serve some of the flood issues that we had from last year. So they got some dredging done this year, but I don't think we know how we're going to get our ports dredged next year. And that's going to be an issue. You shut down these ports, I tell you what, you're shutting down a lot of commerce in the Delta region, and agriculture-wise, farmers aren't going to be able to ship their crops downriver at a fair price, and it's going to be an issue. So that needs to be addressed.
You know, I consider the dredging, just because of the nature of the river system, to be an infrastructure issue like any of the others that we have out there. I mean, really what needs to be done, I mean, we had a little discussion on the Inland Waterways Trust System, or fund, and kind of that mechanism for providing funding to address these infrastructure issues. But we really need to collectively get together to determine how we're going to fund these issues so we maintain this system. Because if you have a lock failure in the upper river, or whether you can't dredge one of the ports, or whether issues like in Memphis after the flooding last year with President's Island, where they had the river attempting to cut a new channel across an island, if that happens, that has ramifications for all of our states and all of our communities, because you shut that system down in any one of its components parts, and it has ramifications for the entire system. So, you know, we've attempted to try and be a forum for discussing this issue with congressional interest and the navigators and some of the environmental interest to how can we provide some sort of sustainable means for funding these infrastructure issues that are critically important to all of our states.
Okay, Mayor, go ahead.
Question just on the Upper Mississippi River Basin Association. The members of your organization, what is their charge in terms of working with the state specifically in their needs? Or is that just the governor is making those decisions and the commissioner of ag is coming back? Because specifically, I guess, there was no communication on where the invasive species, where that lock in St. Paul would be shut down. And so everybody south of there, I mean, we've never had a discussion or been engaged in that dialogue. Yeah, the board members are appointed by the governors of the states. And so on an issue like that, that would have been the responsibility of the representative from Minnesota to represent the interest of his administration. So that would have been Governor Dayton and the Minnesota representative. Okay.
Mayor Wharton?
I mentioned the dredging issue at the press conference. I simply wanted to reiterate that that is a really bread and butter issue. The river is, needless to say, a navigable waterway, but a waterway is no good if you don't have ports that your ships can get in and out of. I think tragically our policy has been to view the Mississippi River as a narrow channel that runs through the country with a deep spot in the middle where barges can go up and down. That seems to be where the policy has been. But in places like Memphis, I mentioned our refinery is located on McKellar Lake, which is just an inlet from the river, and it's not at all uncommon to have the water get so low that we have to bring gasoline in from the east, and that's an immediate pocketbook cost to everybody in that region, that refinery. gets gasoline out to Mississippi, eastern Arkansas, and western Tennessee. Likewise, additionally, bringing in industry, we were fortunate to get a new core steel plant in there, and unfortunately, we're not able to represent to them with any certainty who's going to dredge, when they're going to dredge. It's, well, we'll try to get it here, but if we can't get it there, we'll see if we can get it from them, and that's not a way to recruit industry, is to say that the question of dredging is something we'll just have to deal with on an ad hoc basis from year to year. So I hope that when we shape our agenda, that that will be one of the number one issues that we focus on, because it's not something that's just something that it's a hypothetical. This is something that we're dealing with on a daily basis.
Very good. Unless there are any other mayors, go ahead.
I don't have a question, I have a statement. And first of all, I'd like to thank Michael and Chris Massingale for working with us on our port project. We started in 1992, and we finally got to the point now where it looks like we're going to start construction. It's about a $20 million project. We're adjacent to 2,000 acres that's adjacent to the property itself, which we have tremendous potential. Realizing what you've been saying about the cargo boxes, et cetera, and so on like that. But thank you, and for the monies you've worked with us so far. So any of you mayors looking for money, this man right here's got a question. Hard to get, but he's got it.
Okay, I think some of the people in the...
Yeah, you heard that a while ago. It took
3 days.
10 years. No, I did. No,
I believe some of the people in the gallery have some questions. Could you probably identify yourself and what organization, if you wish, for our record? I saw some hands up there earlier anyway. Yes, sir, go ahead.
Greg Maxton here again for H. Memphis. Just a question about the container ships that I'm reading about. My understanding is the savings is the fuel cost savings if the ships come around, but the transit time is quicker from across country and train. Are you able to get keyed on that?
Well, when the ships are sitting out in the ocean waiting 8 or 9 or 10 days, that could be made up by coming through the Panama Canal. The hiccup on the deal, though, I didn't tell you the rest of the story, as Paul Harvey says, of course, is the cost and the time to take them out of the big ships, put them on the barges and send them upriver. That's going to be our challenge. You know.
Is the ports in Mobile and New Orleans deep enough?
I believe Mobile has been doing some dredging to be prepared for it. I know New Orleans has been. Yes. They're dredging in the East Coast too. I went to a meeting last year and talked about this subject, and there were some railroad folks from Carolinas that were at the meeting, and they pretty much said that they're going to win this war. They're going to get their ports dredged, and they're hoping to entice the ships to come around there. So I'm serious. I think that if the mayors in this organization to lobby towards this project, it'll make a difference. We may not get all the Panama Canal shipping, but we ought to get our fair share, don't you think?
Yes, go ahead. You want to step up and use the mic if you want to, because we can hear you better that way.
Brad Walker with Missouri Coalition for the Environment. I was just going to ask, hasn't the Corps already reviewed this container shipping thing up the Mississippi River? No. I believe the Waterways Resources Institute did a study on this just this year.
I haven't seen it.
Yeah, there was a study, but I'm not sure it addresses conclusively what the potential is. I've read it. It does talk about it. I did read it myself, and it sounded like their conclusion was it wasn't economically feasible because all the infrastructure that would have to be built to put containers on barges. So you might want to look into that.
I also think a lot of their focus was on coastal harbors rather than inland ports and harbors. One of the focus was there. I think there is more study to be had regarding the inland navigation.
Bill Wisbrock.
Why don't you come on up and use the mic so we can hear you, because it's kind of hard to hear.
Just to edify couple of things that have been said. They have built 4 new ships to go that they call Panamax. And those ships draft about 57 feet. Currently, there is only one harbor in the United States that can take the 57 feet, and that's New Orleans. And they are looking at Bayonne, New Jersey, that they'll have to raise the bridge at Bayonne like 60 feet, which is just not feasible. The new Panamax ships will carry somewhere around 14 to 15,000 containers, and that's opposed to about 7,000 to 8,000 containers that are on the container ships now.
Comments, reaction? That's impressive. Anyone else? Yes, go ahead.
I guess a follow-up to that statistic for Mr. Marshall. Is the infrastructure challenge then, like you said, putting in the rail cranes at the port to get all the containers off onto a barge?
I think that's going to be the challenge for the mayors here at this table. That's going to be for those ports. That's going to be the challenge.
For our ports?
For our ports,
okay,
yes.
For to take them off the barge onto the rail.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're not going to entice the Panamax ships to come to New Orleans and unload barges, unload these containers, unless we've got a way of receiving them up in our respective ports.
Okay.
What is the current status of that innovation or that new approach or whatever?
The science is there, the mechanics are there. It's just going to take money to do it. You know,
is anyone doing it now?
I think Paducah is doing some of it. Paducah, Kentucky, on the Ohio.
We've had some discussions with 2 groups out of
New Orleans.
Indiana. But the money is a big deal. I don't know if anybody's actually put their finger on it.
Maybe I can address just a little bit. Somebody asked about a feasibility. We just completed the feasibility for the ports here in St. Louis. The Metropolitan Port of St. Louis is the second, well, I guess maybe depending on which stats you look at, second or third largest inland port. We do about between 30 and 33 million tons every year here. The issue is infrastructure, but the study that we looked at showed that it's going to be difficult with to introduce the concept that you just talked about, and the reason is because of the tie that is required for rail. And so, unless you're a rail center, the question is whether or not it's economically feasible. So, I would encourage you to look at that too. I wouldn't say that it's not possible to do it, because it's all about distribution and being able to make the distribution centers and logistics of it work. But the initial feedback we had from the study that was just completed is the containers, because we went in with the idea that we were going to go all in for containers and be one of those destination locations, and we took a look at what the folks in Memphis had already done, which you guys had a leg up on it. It's very difficult to make that economically feasible to go for the long haul unless we had a great tie-in with all of the long haul railroads. And they're very competitive, and their idea is that they will not let the barge industry beat them, except the good thing that the barge industry has going for it is the ability to the quantities. And so our effort now has been focused more on the bulk commodities, and we're looking at that, but we're also looking at if there are containers that are going into any one of these ports, that we will look at trying to put those commodities into the containers if that was feasible. And so it's something that probably needs to be reviewed or looked at from all angles before we dive totally into that.
We're really interested because we don't have locks and dams on our end, so we don't have that challenge at all. And we do, I think you've got 6 Class A railroads, we've got 5, and our rails run right into the port area there, as well as all the major truck lines. So it's going to be really attractive to us.
Any other questions? Otherwise, I think we might just sort of end it right there. And I've been asked to announce that we'd take a 15-minute break, but we would like the mayors to return by 4 p.m. promptly because Mayor Slay is going to take over as we seat our temporary leadership. So please, all the mayors, if you could be back in here by 4 o'clock so we can close out this next phase of the meeting. Thank you. And thank you very much, pal. It was very informative.
Good to see you again.